I never believed in the supernatural until I died embarrassingly in a bubble bath. Now, here I am, a ghost with a stolen body, typing out my story. Trust me, you'll want to hear how I ended up in this mess. I am dead. Well, at least the real me is. You see, this body I'm using to write this isn't mine. I stole it. Don't worry, I won't be using him for too long. Once I'm done writing this all out, I'll give it back to him. He won't even know that anything happened. I'll even be sure to tuck him back into bed once I'm done. So, let me begin when I was still alive. I was your average 24-year-old guy. I wasn't into witchcraft or anything. In fact, quite the opposite. Before I died, I didn't even believe in the supernatural. Now that I think about it, the way I died really was quite embarrassing. I was cleaning a gun when... Wait. That wasn't my original body. It's been so long that I almost forgot. No, I remember now. I was just about to have a bubble bath. The last time I had had one, I was probably about 4 years old. I was admittedly a bit excited. So excited that I managed to trip on my way to the now full tub. My head landed square on the edge of the tub, knocking me out instantly. My unconscious body managed to slide into the water, and I drowned. Next thing I knew, I was in limbo. I suppose I probably went unclaimed by whatever happens in the afterlife. And so I was placed in the waiting room while the higher-ups sorted me out. It actually appeared as if I was in a literal waiting room, the kind you see at every doctor's office. There was no one else in the room, though. Just me and some terrible elevator-type music coming from overhead. Now that I think about it, maybe this was hell. After what seemed like an eternity, the music stopped. I heard a ding, and a voice came from overhead. "Thank you for waiting. Please make your way to the door on your right and step through." Well, I didn't really have any other options, so I obliged. I made my way to the door and stepped through. There was a man waiting for me on the other side. "Welcome. Please take a seat wherever you feel comfortable." He said this, gesturing at the many different seats in the room. It looked like a therapy room. There were couches and a few regular chairs. I took a seat in one of the chairs, and I tried to study the man. Even now, I couldn't explain him if I tried. It was as if his face was constantly shifting. He certainly had some aura about him. I'm pretty sure he was a god of some sort, or at least some type of higher being. "Where am I then?" I finally asked. "I suppose most humans would call this purgatory, or maybe limbo. In short, we weren't quite sure what to do with you." "What do you mean? Can't you just send me to heaven or hell or whatever?" He laughed. "That was certainly on the table. We decided to play rock, paper, scissors for you, and I was the big winner. So I've decided I'm going to give you a second shot at life." "So I'm going to be reborn?" I asked. I chose to ignore the fact that apparently these gods had decided my fate by a game of rock, paper, scissors. "Not exactly. Oh, you'll figure it out soon enough." This was the last thing he said. He then snapped his fingers. I was back in my bathroom staring at my lifeless corpse. Was I a ghost? Is this what he meant by a second shot at life? That doesn't seem quite right. I looked down at myself, and I appeared to be normal. I would have thought I was still alive if my corpse wasn't lying across the room. I waited by my body. Somebody would have to come for me eventually. It took 2 days before a police officer finally made his way into my bathroom and found my corpse. I had confirmed my theory of being some sort of ghost before he ever got there, though. In those 2 days of waiting, I had never gotten tired, hungry, or thirsty. It was just added confirmation when the officer sprinted past me and pulled my lifeless body out of the bathtub. I had tried moving objects during my wait, but I was unable to do anything but look. I hadn't gotten the chance to try and touch another person, though. I approached the officer as he called for paramedics. I placed my hand on his shoulder, and the next thing I knew, I was blinking and breathing. I hadn't thought about it, but I hadn't done either of these two things in the past 2 days. It had been unnecessary before. I looked around the room before spotting my mirror. I was no longer a ghost. I was now the officer. I had taken control of his body. I was a bit clumsy at first in my new body, but after a few minutes, It seemed like I had full control. Just as I got the hang of things, my head, or rather the officer's head, began to pound intensely. After a few seconds of agonizing head pain, I found myself once again staring at the officer from the outside. I had been kicked out of his body. The officer was holding his head while hunched over. "What the hell just happened?" he said. He didn't seem to understand that his body had just been briefly hijacked. I approached him and attempted to touch him again, but nothing happened this time. I wasn't able to retake his body. I didn't know at the time, but there were certain rules for my body snatching abilities. One of which is when I'm kicked out, I can't get back in. I've gotten much better at using my abilities since then. After a while, paramedics came to collect my body. There were 2 who came into the bathroom. 1 man and 1 woman. I knew I was going to try and do what I had done with the cop, but which one should I choose? I highly considered the woman just for the experience, but I wasn't quite ready at the time to take control of a female body. I touched the man's shoulder. Once again, I found myself in control. This time, the transition seemed much smoother, though. I continued to help the woman with collecting my corpse as to not seem suspicious. Several minutes passed, and the headache didn't come this time. With the help of the other paramedic, we placed my original body in a bag and wheeled it back to the ambulance. I began to make my way to the passenger seat when the woman stopped me. "Where are you going? You always drive." Yeah, sorry. I'm actually not feeling so good right now. Do you mind driving?" I said back to her. "Fine, but you are buying my dinner." I began to realize that taking this body may have been a mistake. I didn't know the first thing about being an EMT. If I stayed in this body, I may end up costing other people their lives. There was one problem, though. I had no clue how to separate myself from the body. I had been kicked out of the cop's body, but this one didn't seem to be putting up much resistance. I needed to find a way out on my own. I put everything I had into trying to will myself out of the body. It was a fruitless effort, though. How was I supposed to do this? Getting in had been so easy. Shouldn't getting out be the easy part? I bit down on the man's thumb. It's a habit I've always had when I get frustrated. I bit hard enough to draw blood. I stared down at the small wound, once again wishing I could just leave this body. As I thought this, the headache returned, and a few moments later I was outside the paramedic's body. What had triggered it? Had it been the wound? Possibly a combination of my desire to leave and the wound? I wasn't quite sure at the time, but I was happy to be out again. I followed the paramedics all the way back to the hospital. After they wheeled my body inside, I decided it would be best if I just left. I wouldn't be getting back in my own body. I began to seek out someone new. I realized I should really study someone before I tried taking them. If I wanted to take them long-term, that is. I would need to know all the basics. Their relationships, their job, their hobbies, mannerisms, etc. I couldn't expect to take over someone's life without knowing anything about them. I could use other bodies for short periods of time like I am doing now, but that would only be for specific purposes. There are over 7 billion people on Earth, though, so I'm not too worried about running out of equity. I also didn't fully understand my abilities, though. I would need to practice using my body-stealing powers more, and I really needed to find the correct way to leave a body I didn't want to stay in. I have much more to tell, but this is all I have time for right now. I can't stay too long in this body or they will find me. I'll be back soon with a new body to write more. For now, it's time to put this guy back to bed. I'm back, and I've found a suitable replacement. This body should last me a few days before they find me. I'll explain who they are in due time, but for now, let's pick up where I left off. After I finally said goodbye to my original body, I began to practice my body-stealing powers. Entering a body was the easy part. However, I discovered many things about my capabilities. I could enter anybody I wanted. All I had to do was touch the person. How long I could stay was another thing. Those with a strong mental fortitude like the police officer could kick me out almost instantly. Those people were rare, though. Most people were easy to overpower, and I could take control for as long as I wanted. Exiting the body was a little bit trickier. For those with weaker willpower, I had to force them to want their body back in order to get out. Physical pain was usually enough to do it. I had to want out as well, though. I could damage a weaker person's body as much as I wanted, but if I didn't want out, then they wouldn't get their body back. It would be risky to take the body of someone who doesn't value their life, because I may have to kill them in order to exit the body. For those wondering if I can take over the body of an animal, I certainly tried. Most animals avoid me like the plague, though. Birds don't seem to mind me, but anything else runs at first sight. I was able to pet a dog who trapped itself in its doghouse, but I wasn't given control of his body. I think it must be a compatibility thing. The whole time I was learning to use my abilities, I found something a bit odd. Not once did I ever run into another dead person. If I'm a ghost, shouldn't I be able to see other ghosts? Maybe it doesn't work like that, though. I couldn't possibly be the only person like this, though, could I? Regardless, once I began to get the hang of my abilities, I began to seek a proper host. I could have searched for someone younger with an undeveloped personality, but I really did not want to go through the younger years of life again. I wanted someone basically like me, a loner. They needed to have a decent job, though, and if they were a little more attractive than my original body, then who would I be to complain? It took a while, but eventually, I found the perfect body. He was about the same age as I had been when I died. Despite his young age, he had climbed his way up to a managerial position at a factory. Behind the scenes, he was quite lonely, though. He had poured everything into his job. I never saw him talk to any family, and he never had friends over to his home. As far as looks go, he was no Brad Pitt, but I don't think he would have problems attracting the opposite sex. I watched him for a while before taking over. It was important for me to at least learn how to properly do his job. I had never been a manager before. He was a business-only sort of person at work, so I wouldn't have to worry too much about his work relations. After I felt I had learned enough, I stole his body. It really was a perfect match. When I was in his body, it was like it was my own again. He didn't try to fight to push me out either. I decided I wasn't going to waste this life doing nothing like I had the last one. I kept his job, of course, but I started becoming more social. I went to bars, clubs, and other social events. I even managed to bring a few girls back to my new home from time to time. Before I knew it, I had been in my new body for an entire year. I had almost forgotten that I even had a previous life. Everything seemed to be going perfect. But of course, good things can't last forever, can they? I noticed someone had begun to follow me. It was a black car with heavily tinted windows. Wherever I went, that car always seemed to be there. I tried to get its license plate, but it never seemed to get close enough for me to see it. I tried reporting it to the police, but they said they couldn't do anything unless I had evidence that I was being stalked. They sent a patrol car through my neighborhood, but that was all. The car was obviously gone by the time the police showed up, though. As quickly as it began, it ended just as quickly. After about 2 weeks of the car stalking me, it just disappeared. Perhaps I had just been overly paranoid after all. I resumed my new life as if nothing had ever happened. That was a mistake. I woke up a few nights later to find myself surrounded by at least 5 hooded figures. Before I had time to react, a knife was plunged into my chest. Blood began to spew from my chest as I felt the life fading from me. I was able to eject myself from the body just before my host took his last breath. After I left the body, the figures turned to face my ghost self. Could they see me? The one who had plunged the knife into me approached me. Once he was close to me, he began to kneel, and then he held out his hand. I wasn't sure what to do, so I ran. For whatever reason, they didn't seem to chase after me. I ran for several miles before I even thought of stopping, though. I found an old rundown house and I let myself in. I sat down on the floor and tried to process what had just happened. Before I got the chance, a voice spoke. "Rough night, huh?" In front of me was the god who had given me my powers. "Rough night. I was just killed again," I said angrily. "Well, it wasn't really you. It was the body you stole. I probably should have told you about them, though." "Them? You know who they are? Well, yeah. I know who everyone is. Those people are special, though. They are part of a cult that worships me. It's kind of funny. They think you are their savior. What about this is funny? If they think I'm their savior, then why the hell did they put a knife in my chest? It's simple, really. They don't think that was the right body for you. They are a bit crazy, but they have always been loyal to me. So I rewarded them by helping find you. Why would you do that? I don't want to be a part of this, I shouted. Because this is the most fun I've had in years. I mean, come on. Doesn't being the savior of a cult sound a little cool? I don't want to be in a cult. I just wanted to live a normal life again. I promised you a new life. I didn't promise you a normal one. If you don't want to be in a cult, you should really start moving. They are almost here. As he finished saying this, I noticed headlights coming up the street. I didn't give it a second thought. I ran again. I managed to make it to a busy stoplight. I took over a driver and drove as far as I possibly could. I swapped from body to body on my trip. I didn't want to take anyone too far away from their life since I wouldn't be keeping any of these bodies. I'm currently in a small town on the East Coast. I think I may try to catch a flight to another country soon. I think they will find me eventually no matter what. But it could at least buy me some time to figure out what I should do. I've become part of a game for a god, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't think he's going to let me into any sort of afterlife anytime soon. So it seems I have two options. Keep running or become the savior of a cult. Who would have known my life after death would be so much more interesting?